afternoon, everyone, and welcome to JRSA's Fall Virtual Research Gathering for 2022. We're so grateful that you had time to join us today. My name is Susan Howley, and I'm a program director here at JRSA. I just have a few quick housekeeping remarks, and the first is to thank the Bureau of Justice Statistics for their support of this event and all of our work with you all. And now I'd like to introduce JRSA's Executive Director, Jeffrey Sedgwick, and JRSA's Board President, Megan Alderden, who will share with you JRSA's vision and opportunities. Jeff?
Thank you, Susan and Megan. Let me also acknowledge the rest of the 2022 and 2023 JRSA Executive Committee. In addition to our President, Megan Alderden, there's our Vice President, Stephanie Lopez Howard, our Secretary Treasurer, Mindy Teneipel, Delegate Jack McDivitt, Delegate Kara Miller, Delegate Jessica Reichert, and our past President, George Saylor. So they will be your executive committee for JRSA for this coming year. All right, so Megan, I'm going to pass the ball to you to get started, and away we go.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Jeff. It's a great honor to be here today. Gatherings like this have always been critical to the SACs and the important work that they carry out. Meetings that allow SAC directors and staff, BJS staff, university researchers, and JRSA staff to coalesce around current and emerging topics in criminal justice is critical for building and maintaining the competencies and capacities of the SACs. I know, having been a SAC director myself. I'm going to age myself a little bit here, but I remember the first BJS JRSA national conference I attended in 2000. I was a relatively new research staff member with the Illinois SAC. Jerry Remker was the director at the time, and he agreed to send me to the conference that was held in Minnesota. As a newly minted researcher, bright-eyed and hopeful, I was spellbound by the topics, the experts, the research, and the discussions. But most importantly, it solidified my decision that I wanted to engage in research for the purposes of informing policy and practice. It is what SACs do, and that work is even more critical now. A lot has changed since my first JRSA conference. Today, now more than ever, data are being amassed with greater potential for linking across systems for the purposes of informing policy and practice and improving the administration of justice. But those same data systems bring with them challenges that those of us who have been working with administrative data quickly recognize. Sophisticated data analyses, techniques, and technologies may help us identify new trends, but it's the trained, knowledgeable, and conscientious researcher practitioner who interprets and gives meaning to them. It is the researcher practitioner who knows where administrative data falls short. It is the researcher practitioner who can take research findings and translate them into understandable and actionable practices. SAC directors and staff are also acutely aware that for every data point, there is a human on the other side. As researchers, we are interested in identifying patterns and trends that can be used to identify and help identify policies and practices that help people and communities. SACs are an integral component to the nation's ability to compile, analyze, interpret, and disseminate research findings for more just outcomes. SACs' work to disseminate human narratives through data analysis and reporting is for the common good. I would argue, therefore, that SACs hold an immense responsibility, and as an association for SACs, JRSA's responsibility is to assist SACs with this mission. In 2020, JRSA undertook an initiative to learn more about how it could assist SACs in meeting their obligation to provide objective research for the purpose of more equitable and just outcomes. From that, we learned that SACs face unique challenges. A typical SAC director must contend for staff and budget resources that provide SACs with the capacity to take on multifaceted, complicated data analysis and program evaluations in an environment where policies and practices are rapidly changing. They must oversee changing staff competency ever-changing staff competencies needed to keep up on new and innovative statistical techniques and software and research interpretation, develop effective communication strategies that not only bridge the gap between research and practice, but strengthens trust and legitimacy in the system, and stays connected with others for peer-to-peer knowledge exchange, tapping into expertise and support. It's with these challenges in mind that JRSA staff designed a 3-point strategy that Jeff will briefly outline.
Thank you, Megan. Basically, we have been engaged for the past several years in really reimagining JRSA and thinking about how we can be more focused and attentive to the needs of our stakeholders and deliver services that you need to be successful in your jobs. To begin that, we have thought about who our stakeholders are, and those include both research consumers and research producers. Among the research consumers, there are policymakers, journalists, practitioners, educators, students, and advocates. Among the research producers, there are think tanks, criminologists, crime analysts, court administrators, and corrections analysts. We've thought about each of those groups of stakeholders and tried to identify what JRSA could do to serve those groups and meet their needs. As we thought about those stakeholder needs, they seem to us to fall into essentially 4 categories. One is individuals need to improve their job skills and their ability to perform in order to advance their own careers. People join associations like JRSA to be better at what they do and to see their careers advance. Secondly, members join an organization like JRSA in order to see their organization operate better, be more effective, broaden their reputation, raise their profile, and gain the resources and the support that they need to succeed. Third, people join an organization like JRSA in order to stay on top of news and information. There's lots of information out there. People need a place where they can come and find the news and the information that they need to flourish in their job and succeed. And finally, people join an association because they like to associate. They want to connect with their peers and feel a sense of belonging to a community. So as we've reimagined JRSA and asked how we could serve our stakeholders better and touch on all 4 of these needs, we've come up with essentially 3 pillars for the organization. One is the justice research community, which we are actually launching today. It is now part of the JRSA infrastructure, and in a moment I'll show you how to access it. Secondly, we will in the next several weeks launch the Justice Information Center. Within JRSA, we sometimes joke about this is ISAR on steroids. This is a collection of all of the information resources that JRSA and its members, including you, the SACs, have produced over the years, put into a database that is easily searchable. It's open to the outside world. So for example, if you put into Google, you're looking for information on, say, hate crimes in state X. If any of our members have done a report on hate crimes in state X, it will show up in Google. I think you're going to find the Justice Information Center to be a dramatic step forward in your ability to access information that you need in order to be successful in your job. And finally, there's the Justice Research Academy, which we're currently working on developing. It is going to be an online, on-demand, asynchronous, when you need it, learning center where you can go and find learning resources to help you sharpen your skills, whether those are skills in communicating results or analyzing data. So we've really spent a lot of time and made a lot of changes to the underlying infrastructure of JRSA and the way we operate, the software that we use to keep information and make it available, the way we provide learning opportunities that are interactive and on demand when you need them, and also providing you opportunities for real-time conversations among yourselves, either asynchronously or live on the justice research community. If I can for a moment, what I will do is show you all on our homepage how you would find the first of these three pillars that we've already launched. If you come to the JRSA homepage, you click on the member login. You come over here, you're on the login page. You go to, I need to bump this down just a moment. Go here to access my password, log in. You come to your member page and notice right here, community forums. Click on that forum and you'll find a whole set of discussion boards that we've already created on different topics for different reasons that you can subscribe to. You can go to that discussion board, you can make an observation, you can pose a question, you can ask for help. By subscribing to it, you'll be notified whenever somebody goes to that board and responds to you or posts something to the board, so you don't have to keep going back and checking to see if anything's changed. You'll get a notification something has changed. You'll notice here we already have a discussion board so that if you hear something or see something during a presentation, you want to make an observation, contribute to that topic, ask a question, ask for further clarification or resources, you can go to this discussion board, post on it, and you'll notice we've already got subtopics set up for each of the presentations during this virtual research gathering. So that's just an example for you of some of the work that we've been doing behind the scenes, building out our infrastructure to better serve your needs and reimagine JRSA. So let me log out here, and Megan, you can have the screen back if you'd like. Okay, so we've gone over those three new basic, we refer to them internally as pillars of the organization: the Justice Research Academy, where you can learn and strengthen your skills; the Justice Information Center, where you can easily find the work of our members and our staff and other information resources that you may need; and the Justice Research Community, always available to you, always an opportunity to join a conversation, help each other out, do peer-to-peer learning, all of the types of things that you show on each of these resources. You are going to see, like I said, the Justice Research Community has already been stood up and it's live now for your use. The Justice Information Center is coming in the next several weeks or months, certainly by the end of the year. And we're hoping by early next year to mid next year, we will have the Justice Research Academy up and running with multiple learning resources available to you on demand when you need them to build your skills in evaluation or research and statistical analysis, methodological innovations, dissemination strategies, or how to communicate and present research. So all of this is available to you now or coming in the very near future. And this is the fruits of what we've been doing as we've been thinking about how better to serve you as JRSA members. So Megan, back to you.
So we wanted to highlight kind of what this looks like from an implementation perspective. So now that we've got the three pillars kind of developed and structured, what is this going to look like over the next couple of years as we fully implement the strategy. So there's some things that we think each group can do, and so this kind of highlights some of those tasks. I'll let Jeff talk a little bit about what the JRSA staff will be doing, and then I'll talk a little bit about how the board will support it and what members can also do to support this initiative.
Okay, thank you, Megan. As I said, we have launched the Justice research communities as of today, so that is up and running. We are going to be launching the Justice Information Center no later than the first quarter of 2023, and I anticipate it will be sooner than that, but by no later than the first quarter, followed by the Justice Research Academy by the end of the second quarter of 2023. So we're continuing our implementation of all three of those components, better to serve our members. We will continue to engage the larger JRSA community throughout implementation, soliciting your feedback, asking you what works well, what we can tweak and make work better. What are things that we're offering that you don't find particularly useful? What are things we're not offering that you'd love to see added to the menu of resources that we offer to meet those four needs that I talk about in terms of stakeholder needs and reasons why people join an association. So we will continue to engage our members and potential members throughout this process of implementation. And while we're doing that, we will be quietly behind the scenes, collecting and assessing the data to manage information and make sure that we're providing the resources that you need, in part by, as you come to the website and log in and take advantage of these three pillars, we'll be checking to see where you're going and what you're looking for, and making sure that we're providing adequate support to the areas where you're seeking information in order to be able to be more successful and effective in your job. And Megan, I'll turn it back to you for the board.
Sure, and the board will be supporting this effort too. Of course, part of our responsibility is make sure that that JRSA staff are held accountable to making sure these new initiatives get up and running. I don't have any concerns about doing that. They've done an excellent job so far, and we look forward to continuing to work with them. But we're also going to be actively involved in helping JRSA actually implement them for the benefit of the SACs. And we're going to do that by developing some subcommittees that actually help support the new strategy. So you'll learn about those as we roll those out. We're also using not just the subcommittees, but other strategies to engage the larger JRSA community in discussions about what things can be improved, additional feedback to identify potentially, for instance, what are ways we could use the Justice Academy to help SAC directors better prepare their staff to do some of the work that they need to do, especially as, at least my experience as a SAC director, is that you do sometimes have a lot of staff turnover, and the amount of time that's spent to try to get those staff prepared to do the work that you need them to do, it takes a lot of energy on the SAC side of the SAC director side. So it would be great to be able to design some materials that could help achieve some of those activities for the larger group. And then, of course, we're going to be working alongside JRSA to help develop those metrics to help identify and review how that implementation is going so that we can make modifications along the way. But we also want to talk with you about what you can do to help support this activity. Obviously, all this has been done with the intention of helping SACs, but it's also helpful when SAC members are also engaged in the process. And there's lots of things that you can do, some of which include sharing your own insights with each other on the Justice Research Community kind of component, participating potentially as a member of a subcommittee. There was a amazing subcommittee a number of years ago that was working on technical assistance and capacity building. We'd like to kind of reinstate that, or at least something similar to that, to support some of the work that we'll be doing. And then, of course, just attending and being engaged in the opportunities that are available to you. And I know Jeff has some other ideas of ways in which you all could be involved.
Yeah, I think the key to this is, and I can tell you that the JRSA staff has bought into a culture of continuous improvement here. And so what we want to do is we want to end every day by taking a moment and say, okay, what did we do well today? What could we do better tomorrow? And we can only do that effectively with your help. We need your feedback. We need your reaction. We need to hear from you when you say, gee, you did something and you did it really well. That was just what I needed. We also need to hear from you when you say, we really appreciate the effort you made to provide this other resource, but quite frankly, it didn't quite meet our specific needs. Here's how we would suggest that you tweak it and make it even more effective for us. So we really need your feedback on a continuous basis to tell us, is what we're trying as we develop this new approach to JRSA and reimagine the organization built around these three functions. Are we hitting the mark? Your mark? Are we meeting your needs? Because the organization will grow if it meets the needs of its members. And for us to do that, we need you to communicate with us what your needs are, and then give us feedback when we deliver services and tell us, did we do a good job or could we do better? And, you know, around here, we talk about feedback is the breakfast of champions. You only get better if you pay attention to what your members want, need, and think of what you're doing. So we really solicit your input every day on everything we do. Come to our website, tell us what you think. Come to our conferences, tell us what you think. Come to our webinars, engage with them. Tell us what you think when it's over. And it's not we try to make this much more sophisticated than simple, here's a handout at the end of a presentation with 4 or 5, pretty easy questions. We're looking deeper into things. What works for you? What meets your needs? What can we do to help you, for example, more effectively communicate the work that you do to your state government in order to gain additional resources to build your organization's capacity to do even more good for your state? That type of feedback we desperately need from you all. And we're here to serve you. This is your organization. It's not ours. I mean, we keep reminding each other on the staff, we work for JRSA. You own JRSA. All right, Megan, do you want to jump on some of these, or?
You can go ahead and take these.
Okay. Just some additional things, just beyond the 3 pillars. I mean, the 3 pillars are a means. They're not an end. What we've been looking for is we want to expand JRSA's membership and JRSA's influence. Okay, we want everybody to know what JRSA is, who they represent, who their members are, and what they do. There is a huge need out there, and we all know this. There's a huge need out there and an enormous appetite for credible information on the performance of the criminal justice system. Everybody is concerned about that. We need to speak to a broader audience, explain to them what we do and what our members do, and how we make this a better community to live in every day, okay? As part of that, we want more members. We want more influence. We want a bigger audience. So we're always looking for opportunities to build our membership. We're also looking immediately at a panel discussion on the implementation of NIBRS and the change in the reporting of crime numbers for 2021, which I'm sure all of you noticed, they were quite different from previous reports, and it generated an awful lot of interest in the journalism community who were trying to figure out, how do we report these new numbers? This is different. This is not like the same old, same old. So we're putting together a panel that's aimed at the larger community of policymakers, practitioners, and journalists, helping them understand what the implementation of NIBRS means and how to interpret the numbers that you get now, when people are obviously they're interested in the crime numbers because they want to benchmark, are things better or worse this year than last year? But when the numbers are different and they're measured differently, then there's an interpretation issue, and we want to contribute to that discussion to clarify what the transition to NIBRS entails and why the numbers look different today than they did last year. The other thing we're involved in with the Bureau of Justice Assistance is the implementation of the Deaths in Custody Reporting Act, which has been around since before I was BJS director in 2006. I believe DCRA was passed in 2003, but it's been a perennial problem in terms of getting full reporting and accurate reporting on the number of deaths that occur to individuals or among individuals who are held in custody, either in a prison, a jail, a lockup, or in the process of being taken into custody during arrest. This has been a perennial problem. It's become a major bone of contention and problem on the Hill. And BJA has approached JRSA and asked us if we will help with our members think through how to improve reporting and make it more complete for DCRA so that the country has accurate statistics on the number of fatalities that occur every year among people who are held in custody or being taken into custody. The last initiative that we're working on, and we're really excited about this, is there will be an in-person 2023 JRSA conference. I am pleased to tell you that we are going to conference this year at the end of July, the 24th to the 26th in Long Beach, California, and we're going to conference with SEARCH, which is the National Association of Criminal History Repositories. As you all know, BJS administers the SJS program in support of the SACs. It also administers the NCHIP program in support of criminal history repositories. So we share the same funding source and kind of parentage, if you will. And we're looking forward to collaborating with them and perhaps building that conference to be a much larger conference of people who analyze crime data, people who store crime data, and the technology communities that know how to make that data accessible, usable, and useful. So we're pretty excited about the possibility of joining SEARCH in their 2023 conference in Long Beach, and we're really excited about actually getting to go to conferences and see each other real live in person as opposed to virtually. So those are the other things that we're working on these days. Any questions?
Yes, we've had a few questions come in, and folks, I want to remind you, just use that question tab to submit your questions. The first that's come in: how many different people in a SAC can have a login per state membership? Is it one cost with unlimited logins, or is there a cap?
I believe under the current bylaws that we have, for a SAC that pays the regular SAC dues of $475 a year, they are allocated 5 voting memberships. Now, there is in the bylaws a little caveat that says it is up to the SAC director to decide how to allocate those 5 votes. Where you have a SAC that maybe only has a director and 1 other staff person, you still get 5 votes. Okay, so you actually get to vote multiple times in a situation like that. But every SAC does get, as its allocation for paying its annual dues as a SAC, it gets 5 voting memberships.
So we got another comment about someone who is also excited about conferencing in person. But related to that first question, are the community forums just for members?
Now, Jason may need to jump in on this and if I get this wrong, but I believe the way the communities are set up right now is anyone can access the communities and read them, but if you want to post to them, you need to be a member. So the community discussion boards are open to anybody to read, with a couple of exceptions. I think there's a couple of discussion boards that we have that are closed, but I'll double check on that. But most of the topical discussion boards, anyone can go in and read the discussion board, but you can't join the conversation or post without being a member.
Right.
Good question, by the way.
Another question. There is already a SAC director email listserv. How do the community forums differ?
I think the listserv essentially allows you to distribute an email to a large group, as in all the SAC directors, okay? One of the advantages of the discussion board is that it maintains all of the posts that are put on it. So it preserves what's being disseminated. A listserv doesn't necessarily do that. And in fact, in a lot of cases, a listserv won't keep a discussion thread. So what we've been doing with the discussion boards is saying where you want to have a conversation and you want to keep a record of that conversation, a discussion board is a far better vehicle than a listserv because it keeps everybody's post in either in asking a question or responding to someone else's question or making an observation. In fact, I'll share with you an idea that we talk about internally, and I'll tip my hat to Jim Lynch, who followed me as director of BJS for coming up with this. But he said, you know, one of the really nice things about a discussion board is they have a kind of a natural life where somebody poses a provocative question. There's a lot of action on that, and then it dies out over time. And, you know, some people would say when the conversation dies out, that's a problem. Jim Lynch's point was, no, when the conversation dies out, it means you've reached a consensus. And that's a moment where basically you want to assign a staff member to go in and take that whole discussion thread, summarize it, and say, here's a white paper. We just crowdsourced a white paper on this topic. It's free content. What's not to love, right? So I think once you get used to using a discussion board, and you know, I would urge you to try them. Pick out a couple of topics that you're interested in and subscribe to that board. And if there's nothing there, say something. Post a question. Be provocative. Say something outrageous. Get the conversation going, and then see where it leads. But understand the discussion boards, you know, have a natural life where they kind of build up and then they fall off. But you know, that just means it's time to start a new conversation because we've reached a consensus on the old topic.
All right, another question that's related to the same member website. In the demo, you had a member profile. Is that something we need to fill out to participate in the community forums?
First off, if you're a member, please fill out your profile, okay? Because it gives us, let me tell you how that gets used, okay? I can give you 2 or 3 different examples of how we use that. Number one, when you fill out a profile, part of the profile is you say, what are your interests? That allows us to customize when we are distributing or disseminating information by email. That allows us to target. If we get an information resource, a document, a webinar, whatever, it allows us to target the email and say, hey, you expressed an interest in this topic, so you're getting the notification that we've got something available on that topic. If you don't fill out the profile, we're kind of flying blind. So you're either going to get way too much email on things you don't care about, or you're not going to get email on things you do care about. So filling out a profile helps us get the right information to you. That's number one. Something else that's incredibly helpful for us is when you fill out a profile, and I believe it was the state of Wyoming, they thought this one up and we didn't. They actually submitted staff strengths in addition to staff needs. You know, here are things we need assistance on. They put in, here are things we're really good at. I looked at that and I said, oh dear God, that is wonderful information to have for the mutual assistance program. You can actually go in and query the member database and say, who's got strengths on this particular research technique? And boom, you'll get a list of all of our members who've said, yeah, I have a strength in that. So if you give us your needs, it allows us to target our communications to you. And if you tell us what your strengths are, you've just done a world of good for your colleagues, because now when they have a need, they can go in and say, who's got a strength in this area that could help me out? You know, it really makes the mutual assistance program much more effective and much better targeted. So we really urge you, yes, please do take some time to go in and fill out your member profile, because it helps us tailor what information we send you. We're not going to send you stuff you're not interested in. It helps us tailor our programs to meet the needs of our members. And it also helps us pair you up with somebody who needs assistance in an area where you have some experience and some strength. So yeah, fill out that profile.
Great, thanks. And as you're talking about emails, that just triggered something in my mind. Folks, if you are not receiving the monthly newsletter, please reach out to myself or Jason. We'll help you make sure that you're on the list and that we're not getting caught in your spam filter, because you don't want to miss the monthly newsletter along with other emails that might come out targeted to your interests. Another question, is there a way to notify, maybe through the SAC Director listserv, when something is posted in the community forums, or do you have to just keep checking back?
No, you do not need to keep checking back. What you do when you go to the discussion board is you can subscribe to a topic. And by subscribing, what you're doing is the system will automatically generate an email to you. And I believe on the notification, when you fill out, when you subscribe, I believe there are options whether you want to be notified daily or weekly when something is posted to the discussion board. So you don't need to keep going back and checking to find that nothing's changed. If when you go to a board and you say, this is something that I'm really interested in, I want to subscribe to this, the system will automatically notify you every time somebody has posted something new to that particular topic, which saves you a lot of time. Because I'm with you, in the old days, you'd find yourself going back and checking the community discussion board multiple times a week and nothing ever changed, and you finally just threw up your hands and walked away. This system takes care of that. It only notifies you when somebody has posted something new.
All right, the next question. How do we learn more about subcommittees or sign up for one?
Megan, do you want to take that one, or shall I?
That's a really great question. I imagine over the next month or so, we'll actually start fleshing out what those subcommittees are going to look like and their charges, and then getting the board to kind of approve them. And then once that's done, we'll start reaching out to members to see if they're interested. We might actually use the community research forum to maybe identify or post those out so that people know what they are, and you can just sign up that way.
All right. Looks like that's all the questions that have come in. Do either of you have closing thoughts?
Megan, I always give the president the last word.
Yeah, I'm a woman of few words, so well, I hope you all enjoy the remaining part of the research agenda. I look forward to kind of learning about kind of everything that's on the about criminal history records and what Arizona's been up to. So it'll be exciting to kind of hear about that. But again, I really hope I hope you see what we've done of the last couple of years has really been with the intention of helping SACs move forward in the work that they're doing and highlight all of the work that you're an effort that you have been undertaking over the last several years. And we're hoping to get your feedback on that process.
Yeah, just to add to that, we are very close to launching the Justice Information Center, which is going to be a searchable database that actually works. And right now, just in the SJS collection, which is what we've labeled your work, so it's the work of the SACs, we have 1,400 different publications already in that database. And they're very easy to search. You can search by the author's name, you can search by the date, you can search by the topic, you can search by the title. So I think you're going to find it a quantum leap in terms of the usability of what you may remember, probably not terribly fondly, as ISAR. We're excited about this. It's built on a platform that was designed for librarians and libraries to catalog information resources. So it's very easy to use, very easy to find what you want. And we are in the process of putting into that database, not only all of your work, but all of the work that we do on research projects in-house with JRSA staff or training and technical assistance centers that we've operated over the years, including Susan's Center for Victim Research. The old days, we had the National Juvenile Justice Evaluation Center. We currently have a whole library of resources for the Smart Suite programs funded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. It's going to be an extraordinarily useful tool for you all to find information resources, and then backed up by the Justice Research Academy and our new library of online learning resources, where you can find a wide variety of resources designed to build your skills, whether they're in communication or data availability or research methods, so on. So we're hoping that this is a big plus for you and your professional development and your success in doing your job and being an important part of the public debates on criminal safety public safety or criminal justice in your communities. So that's our aspiration, and we're going to depend on your feedback to know whether we hit the mark or not.
Thank you both.
Everybody.
This has been very, very interesting and enlightening. All right. Welcome back, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce the next session, where we hear about this year's Yearwood Awards. Brad, I'll turn things over to you and to Jeff.
All right, thanks, Susan. In this session, what we want to do is we want to introduce this year's Yearwood Award winners. But before we jump into the winners and their presentations, I would like to turn it over to Jeff, who will give a little bit of background on what the Yearwood Award means to our SAC members and to JRSA.
Thanks, Brad. Actually, the starting comment I'd like to make on this is to say that, share with all of you, this was an extraordinary year for JRSA and for the SACs. We are replacing 14 SAC directors this year. That is, there's been a lot of turnover in the leadership of the SACs. And as I think about that, it reminded me that, geez, there's a lot of people out there that probably don't have any idea why these awards are called Yearwood Awards. So I'm pleased to introduce this panel discussion by our 2022 winners of the Douglas Yearwood National Publication Award. But I want to simply acquaint you all with why we've got an award that's named after Douglas Yearwood. This award recognizes outstanding efforts by statistical analysis centers to apply empirical analysis to criminal justice policymaking in the states. And criminal justice experts from the academic and research communities that we solicited evaluated the participants' publications based on effective and appropriate use of criminal justice data and methods, clear and comprehensive discussion of findings, and thorough, innovative dissemination of information. So JRSA's National Publication Award was originally established back in 1986 as the Philip Hoke Award in memory of the first Louisiana SAC director and one of the founders of JRSA. The award was renamed in 2012 in memory of longtime North Carolina SAC director and former JRSA president, Douglas Yearwood. Doug himself was a winner of the Hoke Publication Award and published in JRSA's peer-reviewed journal. Under his leadership, the North Carolina SAC served as a model for the role SACs can play in state government. Prior to becoming SAC director, Doug worked as an information systems planner and social research associate with the North Carolina Governor's Crime Commission. He held research positions with the State Attorney General's Office and the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and was an advanced certified law enforcement planner through the International Association of Law Enforcement Planners. So with that background information, why it's the Yearwood Award, let me turn the session over to JRSA's research associate, Brad.
All right, thanks, Jeff. So with this year's award, much like in past years, we have awards that are given across two categories. The first category is in the research and policy analysis reports category. And in this category, publications are posing one or more specific research or evaluation questions, and typically employing a specific research design to address the issues that are raised in the publication. The second category is the statistical and management reports. And these publications present data that identify and describe one or more justice-related issues. Now, within each of these categories, we give out 2 awards based on the size of the agency's staff. One award in each category is given to small SACs who have fewer than 5 full-time employees or 5 full-time staffs, and one for larger SACs with staff sizes of 5 or more employees. Today, we've asked our awardees to address the following 4 points in their presentations. Who was the intended audience for the publication, and how was this determined? What was the audience's information need, and how was that identified? How does that audience prefer to absorb the information, and how do you know? And given the previous items, what was the process by which you decided how to structure, format, and present your report? Now, our presenters will address these topics in their presentations while also giving us a summary of the publications for which they were awarded the Yearwood Awards. Before we get into the actual presentations from our winners, I would also like to recognize the judges who volunteered their time to review the Yearwood Award submissions. The judges in the research and policy analysis category were Timothy Lavery of the Illinois SAC, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing people's names wrong. I have a bad habit of doing that. And also Stephen Haas from ICF International. Our third judge had a health emergency and she could not participate in the review process. However, we had lined up a number of other judges another judge to participate. In the statistical and management category, our judges were Christy Love of the District of Columbia SAC, Dave Roberts from Search, who you'll also be hearing from tomorrow, and Jordan Bolger of the Cook County, Illinois Adult Probation Department. Now, to give you a little bit of information on our first winner. Our first winner that we'll be presenting today is in the large SAC category is Wisconsin. The large SAC in the statistical and management category is Wisconsin. Their project was the Wisconsin Use of Force and Arrest-Related Deaths Data Explorer. They put together a dashboard that provided dynamic and interactive way to access use of force and arrest-related death data rather than static tables or report. It includes 2 separate collection efforts required for all Wisconsin law enforcement agencies, and this is the first use of force data collection spearheaded by the FBI and made mandatory for all Wisconsin agencies. The second dashboard is the arrest-related death collection, or the second collection is the arrest-related death data collection mandated by the Deaths in Custody Reporting Act. The researchers combined these 2 collections into one reporting form for the ease of reporting, and the combined collections became known as the Use of Force and Arrest-Related Deaths, what they will refer to as UFAD. On this dashboard, the judges noted that they were greatly impressed by the range of the analytic capabilities and visualizations incorporated into the tool, the intuitive user interface, and the ability to drill down into the data. They also found the accompanying user guide to be thoughtful, specific, well-designed, and a valuable tool for researchers, practitioners, and the general public. So without further ado, I would like to turn over the floor to the Wisconsin SAC to present their work. If there are any questions, again, please type them in the questions box, direct them to all organizers and panelists. I will keep track of them, and we will take all questions at the end of the presentations. So please, Mary, go ahead and take over.
All right, thank you so much. So not only myself, but also Ashley Billig will be presenting with me today. All right, perfect, there we go. And to get us started, Ashley.
Thank you, Mary. Good afternoon, everyone. First, we'd like to thank JRSA for the recognition and for the opportunity to share our project alongside so many other great projects from other states this year. I'm Ashley Billig, a research analyst supervisor in the Bureau of Justice Information and Analysis at the Wisconsin DOJ. And with me today is Mary Sabertovich, our Wisconsin Use of Force Program Coordinator. Just as a brief introduction to our bureau, our bureau at DOJ is the Statistical Analysis Center for Wisconsin, and we're sort of unique in that we're also the Wisconsin UCR program and the Wisconsin Use of Force program. So we have analysts in our bureau who all work together to collect data, access data, and use data, which we store in-house and have direct access to for research. So that includes our UCR NIBRS data, our use of force and arrest-related death data, along with other programmatic data such as our treatment alternatives and diversion program data. So on this slide here, you see a screenshot of what our current Bureau web page looks like on our Department of Justice website. And you can see along the left side, all the various dashboards that we have that showcase some of the data that we collect, along with some static reports that we've created for the public. What we're discussing today is the use of force and arrest-related death, or we call it UFAD, as Brad mentioned, Data Explorer. And this is our newest dashboard that was launched to the public earlier this year. The audience for the UFAD Explorer is really just about everyone. We want law enforcement to see their own data and other agencies' data, but we also wanted to provide total transparency to the public about the incidents that we're receiving in our use of force program. We were receiving a lot of requests for this information, both for things that we do collect as part of the data collection, but also for things that we don't collect and we don't have. And so we thought an interactive dashboard would be the best way to show everyone exactly what we have and let users interact with the various data points in the collection. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mary, who again is Wisconsin's Use of Force Program Coordinator, to discuss the creation of the UFAD Explorer. As the program coordinator, she did the bulk of the work designing the dashboard and creating the user guide that goes with it. And she also handles all of the outreach, data quality, updating, and maintaining of the dashboard. So Mary?
Thanks so much, Ashley. As Ashley mentioned, my name is Mary Sabertovich. I'm the Use of Force and Arrest-Related Death Data Collection Coordinator for the state of Wisconsin. And picking up where she left off, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did, how we did it, and why we did it when it came to the publication of the UFAD Data Explorer. So starting off with what we did, one of the most important things to understand before we get into it is what is required in the state of Wisconsin and what this data collection is comprised of. So as was mentioned in our introduction, the UFAD data collection stands for Use of Force and Arrest-Related Death Data Collection. It is comprised of two separate federal data collections, the FBI's Use of Force data collection and the Federal Arrest-Related Death data collection under the Death in Custody Reporting Act. In Wisconsin, reporting of both of these collections was started as a voluntary data collection for law enforcement agencies in 2019 and was then made mandatory by state statute on January 1st of 2021 for all agencies to begin reporting this data to us. For this collection, reports are collected when one or more of the following occurs. A subject dies as a result of law enforcement use of force. A subject sustains great bodily harm as a result of use of force. An officer discharges their firearm at or in the direction of a person, even without striking the person, or a person dies while detained, arrested, or in the course of being arrested. One thing we did in Wisconsin to make sure that we are obtaining all data is that for this collection, we made sure that agencies are sending in 0 reports and made that mandatory so that we can tell the difference between agencies who are not reporting and agencies who simply have nothing to report for the month, with their monthly report deadline being the 15th of the following month to fall in line with the federal level collections. So now that you know a little bit more about what is required in Wisconsin, I would like to talk about the UFAD Data Explorer itself. So once we collected all of this data, we wanted to release it in a way that was very interactive so that anyone could come to this dashboard, whether it be the public, law enforcement, policymakers, and explore the data at their own pace, going through the different things that we're collecting and finding it useful in their own ways. The UFAD Data Explorer was released to the public on May 9th of this year, and it was announced to law enforcement, media, and the public via a press release that same day. It includes a user guide that was aforementioned, embedded into a button on the very first page that users can click to start their journey through the Data Explorer, to explain to them how they can go about using the Data Explorer, different ways to utilize the visualizations that are interactive, and also general counting rules. As I mentioned, this Data Explorer was designed to allow users to explore it at their own pace and also to explore things that they were interested in. Many of the visualizations you'll see scrolling by in these slides here are cross-interactive, meaning that if you want to take a look at one section of the visualization and compare it to another, you can do that. Another fun fact is that just a month ago, we hit 100% population coverage for all of our agencies reporting in the state of Wisconsin. So this dashboard not only contains a lot of different data, it contains a very complete picture of the data across all of our law enforcement agencies. Now, while I would love to dig into all of the different pages that you can see scrolling past here on the UFAD Data Explorer, I definitely don't have time for that today, but I do encourage you, if you haven't checked it out already, to take a look at that link I've shown below on my presentation, and you can dig into the data for yourself to see how the Data Explorer works. So now that you know what we did with our data, I'd like to talk a little bit more about how we did it. One of the most important things we started off with when we knew this data collection would be becoming mandatory was to make sure that we had an easily accessible and free tool for law enforcement to report this data to us. What we did to utilize that is the Badger Tracks application. Badger Tracks is an application that's available for free to all Wisconsin law enforcement, and it is currently used for pre-existing forms that agencies are very familiar with. So by utilizing this application, we were using a tool that law enforcement already knew how to use and just adding a new form to report this data to us. The nice thing about this form is it allows agencies to fill it out and be guided through based on the selections they make. It also has validations baked into it to ensure that the data that is making its way to us at least has some level of data quality before it makes its way over, to make sure that the agencies aren't entering things that don't make sense. Now, the nice feature is that once an agency transmits an incident, it is immediately available within our database for analysis and review. Not only was the Badger Tracks form a big part of making sure that we got a lot of compliance in Wisconsin for agencies reporting to us, but another big part of that was our outreach and communication strategy. We used a continuous, and still use to this day, a continuous outreach strategy to make sure that law enforcement agencies are constantly aware of any reporting requirements, upcoming program changes, new training materials that we're always putting out, any missing or late submissions to catch to make sure they meet their deadlines, and any data quality concerns that are found. On the screen here, you'll see just one of the many training resources we released, which is the use of force and arrest-related death decision tree. As you can see, it is quite complex, as is the nature of these different data collections being combined together. But training materials like this really helped us put a good foot forward with law enforcement. By leading with training, it ensured that they were more accepting of the data collection when we brought it to them. Instead of just bringing them something new, telling them they needed to report it without having any backing, we took the approach of let's get ahead of this, release as clear of training materials as we can, and be here at all times to support them with any questions or assistance they may need. One of the big pages that made a lot of difference after we released the UFAD Data Explorer was the agencies not reporting page. In addition to encouraging compliance via constant communication with agencies and doing agency outreach to let agencies who weren't reporting know that they needed to start reporting, we of course could not capture every single agency. What we did was to make sure that in the Data Explorer, we had a page that detailed agencies that were not reporting to the collection, so that not only could law enforcement see if they were not reporting, but the public could also see what data was not contained within the dashboard due to an agency not being within statutory compliance and reporting to us. A fun fact about having this page on our Data Explorer is that after the publication of this dashboard, 2/3 of the agencies that were listed as failing to report on this page have since become compliant, and this released just back in May. So it really helped, in addition to our communication to encourage compliance with the program, that the public, all other law enforcement agencies, and the media was able to see who was not compliant with the program. Now, while we collect all of this different information, a big part that's important to myself and everyone here at BJIA is to make sure that the data we are receiving is quality data. Especially since we are publishing this in a public format, we want to make sure that what we're putting out there is the best quality data we can, as we know that the data that is being published is being used by public, law enforcement, and policymakers to make decisions. And we want those decisions to be based on quality data displayed in our dashboard. Every single reportable incident that comes in via the UFAD data collection is audited, and it is audited only the month after the incident is due, and then on a reoccurring basis if the audit is not responded to or is responded to and is incomplete. I could go into a lot of detail here on all of the different things we utilize during our audit process, but I'd be talking well over my time slot. So just to give a little bit of a high-level view, some of the biggest things we're looking for are to make sure that the values reported make logical sense together. Fun fact, I once took a report where the force type used was a canine, and the force type shown on the subject was a taser. So I had a lot of questions about if the dog used the taser. Spoiler alert, it did not. Also, I would make sure that the form values are matching values we're seeing in incident reports coming out. It's important to make sure that I'm seeing things coming in and matching information I'm getting from other sources. And if that is a mismatch, that I talk to the agency to see where the disconnect is. Just this morning, in fact, I conducted an audit where I had received a reportable incident that showed an incident date that was not the same as the incident date being published by that agency's media. After correcting that, we got the correct information in, and now everything is showing the same correct data quality across the board. Another big thing that we do in the incident audit process is to make sure incidents are actually being reported. Not only can we audit the incidents that we're receiving, but we try to make sure that we're receiving all incidents that are reportable in the state of Wisconsin. We set multiple news alerts to make sure that we are on top of any incidents that we see as reportable in the state. And if we don't see those incident forms coming into us from agencies, we make sure to take the time before those incidents are due to reach out and get those reported to us so that we don't have any major gaps in our data. So now that I've talked about what we did and how we did it, I want to talk a little bit about why we did it. One of the big things we like to push here at BJIA is that we are collecting this data not just because it's statutorily required, but because it's very important data. One of the big quotes that I like and I have here on the screen is that you can't improve what you don't measure. And a reference that I'll use in this is that in 2015, former FBI Director James Comey was quoted when talking about officer-involved shooting data that the United States collection of this data was embarrassing. Because at the time he said he could go online and look up how many movie tickets for a particular movie sold just the previous day, but he couldn't go online and look up how many officer-involved shootings occurred within the states within the last year. Data collections like this are not only required, but they are very important so that policymakers, law enforcement, and the public can get a better idea of what's going on in their states. It's also very important that this data is presented in an accessible format. This is one of the big reasons we decided to go with the UFAD Data Explorer instead of just publishing a paper. We wanted people to be able to move through the data in a very organic way and to navigate it at their own pace instead of perhaps feeling overwhelmed at a different paper, feeling the data wasn't accessible to them. We wanted all audiences to be comfortable exploring this data, hence the Explorer. Moving from that, I'd like to talk about an actual usage example of why we report this data the way that we do. So immediately after the dashboard was announced via that press release, law enforcement, the media, and the public began digging into it. We actually received so much traffic on our website with this one that apparently the page almost crashed, and it continues to be one of our most popular dashboards to this day. A few days after publication, a local media outlet discovered that an in-custody death had not been reported to the data collection by an agency. This was an incident that we were aware of, and we had been working with the agency for many months to get it reported. However, that was to no avail. The media outlet immediately pursued the agency, inquiring as to why this report was not sent to the collection, and then ran a story on, I believe it was the 6 o'clock news that night, on the fact that it was not reported to the collection. That resulted in that incident that we've been pursuing the agency for multiple months to report, being reported the very next day. The last section I want to talk about before I open it up for questions is what's next for the UFAD Data Explorer and some bigger things happening here at BJIA with our UFAD publication. We are going to be looking at adding a field comparison page to the UFAD Data Explorer that will allow users to compare different field segments that they're interested in. For example, this would allow them to compare subject race versus officer race. Year-over-year comparison charts will be added now that we're looking to add our second full calendar year of data so that users can see year-over-year trend lines as far as how many incident reports are being generated each year and what types they are. We are looking to add additional separate Death in Custody Reporting Act information pages to make sure that all of the different fields that are required by that collection are being shown. A reporting timeliness page so that users can take a look at their municipality's timeliness when it comes to reporting, because it's not just about making sure that agencies are getting their data in, but also making sure that that data is getting in on time. And we are also looking at a major overhaul for the Department of Justice website where this dashboard is hosted. It will be going through a series of modernizations and be a little bit easier to navigate in the future for users that are looking to find reports like this. And that's everything for me. Are there any questions for us, Susan?
I believe Brad is keeping his eye on questions. Brad, have any come in?
No questions yet. And what we'll do is we'll, just to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to share their presentations, we're going to hold on to questions until the end, but I'll be keeping track of those as they roll in. So thank you, Mary and Ashley. Great work, and we really appreciate the presentation you all gave us today.
Awesome, thanks, Brad.
All right.
Thank you.
So our next presenter is the winner in the small SAC category for the statistical and management reports. This winner is Maine. And now you may not see the description of the Maine project on the dashboard. And I will let George Shaler, the Maine SAC director, discuss as much as he wants about this. However, the winning entry from Maine was the 2022 Maine Crime Victimization Report, Informing Public Policy for Safer Communities. And the purpose of the Maine Crime Victim Survey was to understand the extent of criminal victimization, crime reporting, and assistance seeking, and to identify differences in rates between demographic groups. A survey pattern after the NCVS was sent out in January 2022 to randomly selected adult Mainers, and a total of 1,263 respondents. It was 1,263 completed responses were received. The following presentation is going to be a summary of the findings from the 2022 MCVS. I should note that the judges commended the report on its thoughtfulness, its execution, and how well they did summarizing the results. And with that, let me turn it over to George Shaler of the Maine SAC to share his presentation on this report.
Thank you, Brad. I'd like to thank JRSA for this award. It is we loved getting news about this, and I also want to acknowledge my colleagues on this project, the lead author Claire Murray, my colleague Robin Dumont, who is our Survey Research Center Managing Director here at the University of Southern Maine, and I'd also like to give a shout out to Alexa Plotkin, a policy analyst here, who made the document pop, if you will. She did a great job with the formatting and presenting the data, we think, in a easy to understand way. And again, we want to thank JRSA for this honor. So let me talk a little bit about why. Do I have control of the slides here?
I'm sorry, no, George, but I'll move them for you.
Okay, all right. So please go to the next slide, Susan. We have this is the fourth time we've done this crime victimization survey, and my colleagues from Wisconsin were talking earlier about just how widely used some of their reports are. This is typically one of the reports that we have the most website traffic, is our crime victimization surveys. And we've done 4, this is now our 4th one. We did the first one back in 2017. So actually, Susan, I'm jumping ahead here. So if you could go to the next slide. So these are the covers of our projects. So this project, this crime victimization survey, was a little bit different than the 3 previous ones. Again, this is not a new topic area to us, but our surveys are modeled after the National Crime Victimization Survey back in 2017 when we did our first one. Is we used almost all the questions that we asked were from the NCVS. We just wanted to kind of know what the criminal victimization rates were here in Maine, because our population was so much smaller than obviously the nation, and we didn't feel like the NCVS could really speak to what exactly was happening here in Maine. The current report started much the same way that any project starts, is that's with a proposal, and the Department of Health and Human Services approached us to about doing another report to bring the findings up to date, because the last one we had done was in 2015. And because we love doing this work, we eagerly agreed and sent in a proposal. Months later, we were told the work would need to go through the RFP process, which we were a little disappointed about, because we ended up writing the RFP for them, which we then subsequently competed for. But what we realized was that in doing this larger RFP, which was geared at victim services, the victim service needs of Mainers, they had removed the crime victimization survey that we felt was really important for this work. And so when we subsequently submitted the RFP, in our response to the RFP, we argued that the MCVS should be put back in it, and lo and behold, they agreed. So this report is what we call a pull-out report of a larger report. And Susan, if you could go on to the next slide. So we have also completed a victim needs assessment, and that was the first part. The first part, this larger report includes, we also surveyed victim service providers. We sent out a questionnaire to victims who agreed to be surveyed. They had to be approached through the organizations that served them. We did not approach them directly. We did focus groups and key informants with victim service providers, and we did this crime victimization survey because this was the approach that we thought would give us a better sense of not only true criminal victimization in Maine, but also the needs of victims and what services are available and what services are lacking in Maine in terms of victim services. So if you could go to the next slide. So this is we did two reports at the same time. This crime victimization survey is summarized briefly in the larger victim needs assessment, but then because this report is so popular with legislators, policymakers, community-based organizations, and the public, we did a separate report, which is what's being recognized today. So Susan, if you could go on to the next slide. So, and then advance one more for me. So we're talking about the Maine Crime Victimization Survey here. So the first three iterations of this survey were done by phone. And we did that with random digit dialing. At the time, we felt that that was the best way to go to get a randomly selected sample that was statistically significant. In each of the first three iterations of the survey, we called 850, roughly 850 Mainers, or I should say we called far more, but we successfully contacted 850 Mainers to get a statistically significant sample. This time around, because of the changes in survey research, we decided to do something a little bit different. We decided to do a mail survey because the field was suggesting that this might yield a better response. We could get enough responses to allow, we wanted the results to be as representative as possible, and we needed to accomplish this a little bit sooner. We wanted to achieve the results a little bit sooner. Our previous surveys had taken a fairly lengthy amount of time, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 months, to contact all the people needed to get a sample, and we were under a little bit tighter deadline, and we thought that we could achieve a robust sample through the mail. And so we opted to distribute the survey via mail using an address-based sample, and then made follow-up phone calls to boost the number of responses, particularly among subpopulations. So in early January, we mailed the survey out, which at this point was a 2-page front and back survey. So we had to shorten the survey, the number of questions, considerably for mail purposes. And so we mailed out 12,000 surveys the first week of January of this year, asking people about their criminal victimization in calendar year 2021. And we also made some phone call follow-ups just to make sure that our sample was representative of our various subpopulations. Just a quick follow-up about our follow-up calls. We began to make them randomly, but once we started scanning the responses that were coming in early, we shifted our calls to target groups that weren't responding as well. And primarily this meant reaching out to people that were younger, 35 and younger. And another change that we made, as I was mentioning, because this was a mail survey, the last survey that we did in 2015 was 87 questions. This time around, it was 35. So, so Susan, if you could advance to the next slide. So we by doing the survey in mail, we were able to also do it in a different language. The 6 languages listed on this slide are the 6 most common languages spoken in Maine. Each survey, each letter that went out included an insert on how, if English was not your preferred language to take this survey in, they could be directed to a website that had the language in 5 other languages. We hoped that this would encourage non-English speakers to do the survey online. That only yielded 2 additional responses, but we wanted to, nevertheless, we thought that that was an important thing to do. Another thing that we ended up doing, because once we started to see the responses come in and we saw that we weren't getting as many younger Mainers to respond, is we utilized an online survey panel where we sent the survey to a panel of young people in Maine, those 18 and older, 18 to 35, who commonly use complete survey panels, and that boosted our response among that segment of the Maine population. So Susan, if you could go on to the next one, please. So this is how the response came in. Again, most of them were in mail, and we achieved a much larger response than we had previously done on our 3 previous crime victimization surveys. The overall response rate was 13%, which we felt really good about. The majority of the responses came from the surveys, and you can see where the other survey responses came from. But we got a much larger response rate, so we were able to do a lot more in-depth analysis with certain subpopulations that we had previously not been able to do. So that was, we were very pleased about that. So here is our analysis plan. We did do some weighting in order to mitigate lower response rates in some demographic groups. Survey data were weighted in terms of age, gender, household income, race, ethnicity, and county to match Maine's population distributions as described in the latest census tables. And after the weighting process was complete, the weight values ranged from 0.31 to 5.29. We calculated confidence intervals for each of the point estimates using the 95% confidence interval. And we'll say a little bit more about this in a second, but in case anyone is curious, what type of software we used, we collected the data in Qualtrics, and we used Remarks software to scan and read the mail surveys, and we used SPSS to clean and analyze the data. So, so here's our the way we presented the data. Here you can see how we displayed the confidence intervals in our graphics using error bars. We think this is a nice way to visualize the precision of the estimates. We can be much more precise about our estimates for white non-Hispanic residents with 1,230 responses than we can be with estimates for people of color. Our statewide population our statewide people of color percentage is about 6%, 6 to 7%. Notice that the rates of one type of crime, violent crime, in this chart is organized by demographic. This is how we decided to organize it. Each of the crimes that we subsequently share in this document are presented in a similar way. And that we also had some information with each section, whether it be violent crime, property crime, etc., is what percentage of crimes were reported to law enforcement, and what percentage of respondents who reported being victimized for a certain crime sought victim services. So So here's, yeah, so Susan, if you could move on to the next slide. Great. So this is, this is an example of what you see here is the focus is on gender differences, and these are by, the types of crime that we responded. We did have some questions. We did have a couple of questions. Almost all the questions were what had happened to you in the last year. We did have a couple of questions that dealt with lifetime experience with rape and human trafficking, and those were new to this survey. Susan, if you could go on to the next one. We also had presented some data in terms of there were certain questions that there were certain types of victimization that we thought might be a precursor to other types of victimization, and in this case, stalking was one of the ones that was that we pulled out. This slide shows, for example, among people who were not stalked, they were victimized for a property crime. Our population reported a rate of 7%. Among those that were stalked, their rate of property crime victimization increased to 22%. So we have a number of sections in the report that take a look at certain crimes together. So for example, someone who, the rates differ quite a bit among people who were not stalked and they're a victim of a violent crime, ranges from 2% among those people who are not stalked up to 25%. These differences were statistically significant as they were in our 2015 study as well. So here, this is up to now, but these are just some of the ways that we depicted our findings. And I just want to kind of share with you some general findings. And again, this report will be available on the website soon. And I want to talk a little bit about why the report is not available right now, but I'll hold that for a second. So what we also depicted in the crime victimization report is which demographic groups were impacted by which types of crime types. And as you can see, with the exception of identity crime, among 18 to 34-year-olds, they were more likely to report victimization for these type of crimes than any other age cohort, and that was true for people of color. Gender was almost all female were statistically significant. People with under 75K of income were more likely to report being victimized, with the exception of identity crimes. And we list some of our counties that had higher victimization rates, and then also relationship status. With the exception of identity crimes, again, people who were not partnered, if you will, were more likely to experience criminal victimization in 2021. So let's see, Susan, if you could go to the next one. Here are some of our key findings in our report. Is crime directly impacted 1 of every 3 adults in the state of Maine in 2021. That is that they reported being victimized for one of the crime types that we asked about in that survey. The majority of crimes in Maine go unreported, and most victims receive no assistance from Maine victim service organizations. So that is, they don't reach out for services, or they live in an area in which victim services are in scarce supply. I should say that I skipped over one thing in the first bulleted point is that, no, I did mention that. I said 1 out of every 3 adults, but also that the majority of all crimes don't go reported to law enforcement. That percentage is around 68%. Those who experienced being stalked were statistically more likely to experience other crimes as well. I shared that on a previous slide. Persons of color were more likely to be victim of any and every type of crime except identity crime. And this was even true after controlling for income. And nearly 1 in 5 crime victims, 18%, who reported having experienced any type of crime in the previous 12 months, reported at least one of the crimes was committed by a current or former domestic partner or family member. So in summary, this report is the result of a large body of effort. There were, as I said earlier, there were a number of data collection processes that went into this larger report. We've just been focusing on the crime victimization survey with this presentation. I do want to mention that this report, we submitted this over the summer, and we have been dismayed that the state has not approved its release yet. I won't get into it too much, but there have been the agency that requested the survey has not been able to get the approval from authorities within DHHS to release that. We anticipate that happening in the next couple of weeks to month. We've had some conversations now that the election cycle is behind us, that this report be distributed. A number of people are aware that the report is done and they want to see it and use it, because it's been so helpful in the past that this information was available to community-based organizations, state agencies, and the like. So that is where we are right now with that report. So anyways, again, we just want to thank JRSA so much for this honor, and this report was such a pleasure to do. We just hope that other people get to use it and it drive policy going forward. So anyways, thank you.
The next presentation is going to be the research and policy winner for the small SAC category. And for the first time that I can remember since I've been at JRSA for the last 4+ years, the same SAC won awards in both categories. So Maine was our winner in the research and policy small SAC category, excuse me, with their publication, Bias and Hate Crime in Maine, Reconciling Reported and Investigated Crimes. So congratulations, George, 2 times over. And in this report, it focused on the important and currently relevant topic of hate and bias crime arrests, their reporting by law enforcement, and their prosecution. The study used a combination of data sources captured in different reporting systems, including law enforcement incident records, as well as state attorney general and district attorney records to determine arrests, civil orders filed, and cases accepted for prosecution. The combined use of these data sources allowed the researchers to examine the case flow through different decision points in the system. As a result, the study uncovered important findings related to incident reporting and processing trends in Maine, the characteristics of case reported, and the likelihood of arrest and prosecution. The judges noted that this report was easy to follow because it was well organized and concisely written, and it also presents the information in an understandable way for researchers and non-researchers alike. So with that, let me turn it back over to you, George, so you can have one more moment in the sun.
Thank you, Brad. That's very nice of you. And again, we want to thank JRSA for this second award, which is we are so honored to receive the Yearwood Award for this report. I had a couple of different colleagues on this. The lead author on this report was my esteemed colleague, Hannah Brintlinger, and we were joined by Jack McDevitt from Northeastern University on this project. Jack, if you didn't know it, Jack has such a wealth of information about hate and bias crimes, and we thought if we were going to do a project here in the Northeast, we needed to involve Jack because he is just so a wealth of knowledge about these subjects, and we made great use of him. And Jack was also one of the authors on this report. So this study came about through some conversations I was having with people in the Maine justice system up here in the Northeast. You know, a lot of times you will read about a certain hate crime that it gets committed, and I kind of kept wondering, like, what happens to these crimes? Because sometimes a perpetrator is found, and sometimes they are not. But then what happens if a perpetrator is found? What is the process? And I'm going to kind of take you through what that process is like here in Maine. And I don't think it's like this in a lot of states, but it could be. So anyways, let's move ahead here. So again, what we wanted to do is Jack Hanna and I wanted to determine the arrest rates and case outcomes for hate and bias crimes that occurred here in Maine. And what we looked at is we looked at hate and bias crimes that were reported to the FBI's UCR program for this 10-year period. And you may be wondering, why did you have to go far back? We started this project actually in 2019. It took a while to pull all of these data together, and I'm going to tell you why. Because we had to collect data from about 65 different organizations to piece together this report. And I will tell you that this is by no means a comprehensive report, but it is the first time I think anyone here in Maine has looked at just the breadth of what transpires in hate and bias crimes here in Maine. So the intended audiences of this research were the state attorney general, the 8 district attorneys that we have here in Maine that serve 16 different counties, state legislators, law enforcement, and other researchers and the public. So let's move on here. So one of the things that we determined by looking at various hate crime reports from other states is that very few of them have information on arrests and convictions. And again, that's what led us to kind of do this, employ this study methodology that we did. Some incidents are frequently not reported to the police, and it also recognizes that there's challenges here with law enforcement agencies must recognize indications of bias and document their findings as bias crimes in order for that to show up. So I think the number of bias crimes that we report on in this presentation that are included in this report are an undercount, a vast undercount at best, because these type of crimes require that law enforcement must be trained to recognize them. My colleague Jack McDevitt, along with some of his peers, Cronin, Farrell, and Nolan, pointed out that despite an increase in the number of agencies reporting hate crimes to the UCR from the early 90s through the mid 2000s, the proportion of agencies that reported no bias crimes remained fairly steady at around 84% in the early 2000s. So a lot of agencies don't report bias crimes, but so that's why we suggest that the numbers that I'm about to share with you are an undercount. So if we could move on, Susan. So the way the hate crimes justice process in Maine works is that if an incident gets reported, the law enforcement agency in the jurisdiction that the crime occurred will complete an initial investigation, document findings, and if they feel that they have enough information, refer this case to the Maine Attorney General's office. At that point, the Maine Attorney General's office can bring what's called a civil order. If well, first of all, they investigate the crime, and if they feel like they have sufficient grounds, they will process a civil order under Maine Civil Rights Act, or otherwise known as MCRA, against the accused. That can, the penalties for which the person can be fined up to $5,000 and have an order establishing that they not go near the place or person in which they targeted the crime against. Some people maintain that that's not a large enough sanction, but that's what's available to the Maine AG under statute right now. Now, in addition to that, the district attorneys in Maine, and again, there's 8 of them that serve the 16 counties. Each DA serves roughly 1 to 4, or serves 1 to 4 counties based on population. District attorneys can bring criminal proceedings against the accused if other offenses were committed during the perpetration of the crime. So, for example, if someone defaced a place of worship and also broke a window, they can, or committed some kind of property damage, the DAs can bring them up on the property crime, and so that's another step in the process. So we wanted to find out what happens in all of these. Like, how often did the Maine AG bring enact a civil order against the perpetrator? How often did a DA prosecute the perpetrator? So what we ended up doing was we downloaded all the hate and bias incidences that were reported to the FBI through the UCR reports, and so over that 10-year period, there were 445 incidents. And again, we believe that that number is an undercount, but that's roughly about 45 incidents a year. You may think, wow, that's a small number, but please bear in mind that the population of Maine is 1.36 million. Maine is a small state population-wise. So what we did is, all of the information that we were able to download included the year of the incident, the agency that responded, that is the law enforcement agency, the date, the offense type. There are certain kind of classifications for these offenses, the number of victims, if there were multiple, the location, like in this case, like the example here is school or college, and the victim type. So it could have been an individual or it could have been a governmental building. So that information is available in the from the Crime Data Explorer, the CDE. Then we sent we broke that data down by law enforcement agency. We looked at how many each of those crimes were responded to by law enforcement agency, and we sent spreadsheets to all agencies that reported at least one hate or bias crime during that 10-year period, and we asked, did an arrest occur? Because in oftentimes a perpetrator cannot be found because maybe they vandalized a building and there wasn't sufficient evidence to find someone. Was there an arrest tracking number? The town, the city the incident occurred in, was a weapon used? And if there was a person who was the victim, was medical care required? So that was what we collected. Now, that in and of itself, so we sent out information to, I think it was 65 different agencies. And it took a fair amount of time to get that data back, as well as to make sure what they were sending back to us was accurate. Then we sent a data request to the Maine AG's office to ascertain whether a civil order was filed under the Maine Civil Rights Act against the perpetrator, if a perpetrator was identified. And again, in a number of these crimes, a perpetrator was not identified. If no one, we also followed up if a perpetrator was identified, if no injunction was filed, why not? Any civil penalty information and any additional information about the case. And then after reviewing the responses from the DAs and the AGs, the main SAC identified a total of 20 juvenile cases which were subsequently removed from the data set for confidentiality purposes. In some cases, the DAs do not share juvenile case records with the public, so we reviewed as the public. The main SAC also removed some cases where no law enforcement response was received. So we sent out records to for 26 cases to law enforcement agencies in which we could not, which we never heard back from. So we didn't get compliance, if you will. After removing the juvenile cases and the non-law enforcement agency response cases, the final case count for this report decreased to 414 for the 10-year period. So anyways, next slide. And then we subsequently sent data requests to all 8 DAs to learn if any charges were filed, and in addition, if the case was accepted or declined for prosecution, number of charges, the most severe, the number of charges that resulted in a conviction, and the disposition. And data from these 3 sources, for law enforcement, the main AG's office, and the DAs, were then merged to determine outcomes for each incident. As there were incidents with more than one offender, the total case count increased to 460 once all 3 data sources were merged. And what I want to just explain there is that in some cases there were multiple perpetrators. And after reviewing the responses received from the DAs and the AG, the main SAC, no, I already mentioned that, I'm sorry. So limitations, if you could move to the next slide, Susan. Again, we feel that the FBI UCR data likely largely underestimates the number of hate and bias crimes that occurred in Maine during that 10-year period. A major limitation, as you probably have already been able to tell, is that the outcome data for these cases are not stored in one location. You have to go to multiple sources. So the final data set used for this analysis, I'm almost laughing as I say this, was compiled from 62 different data sources, a huge number. So, you know, these data are not readily available. The AG's office was unable to identify or locate outcome information in 63% of the cases. And before you gasp too loudly on that, is that some cases were not forwarded to them because the perpetrator was not found in some of these cases, or a lot of these cases. And the DAs were unable to locate 70% of the cases, as best we can tell, because again, there wasn't sufficient evidence to turn over the case to the DAs. While the study is limited in the conclusions that can be drawn, it does identify several, it highlights several gaps in the reporting process, which I think is probably the most instructive element about this report, is that we feel at the main SAC is that there should be a better way of capturing these types of data so that law enforcement, policymakers, key stakeholders are better able to kind of understand hate and bias crimes in Maine. So those are the limitations. So here are just some kind of general findings. This report is available on the main SAC website, unlike the previous report that I was presenting on. And this report has gotten a fair amount of traction. We got a lot of media requests for this, as you might imagine. So what we took a look at is, I just want to give you a sense of what, again, these data come from the Crime Data Explorer at the FBI, and we were able to match them pretty carefully with another report that gets put out here in Maine called the Crime in Maine Report. This is an annual report. It just highlights just strictly the number of crimes that happen in the state. So as you can see in this slide, hate and bias crimes that were reported to the FBI's UCR program declined by 49% from 2008 to 2017. And it's unclear at this time to why the largest decline occurred between 2012 and 2013. But what we do know is that in 2020, which is not part of the year, which is a year that's not a part of our study, the number has reached 83. So the number of hate and bias crimes has increased dramatically since the study period concluded. And I think that's not a surprise given the tension that is going on in our society right now. But we've seen a significant jump in the number of crimes that have been reported. So let's go on to the next slide, Susan. So of the hate and bias crimes reported to the FBI's UCR program, half of the reported cases were race, ethnicity, or ancestry bias motivated at 50%. And then another in what we call intimidation was the most frequently reported offense type. And by intimidation, I mean verbal or physical actions to intimidate someone because of their race, sexual orientation, religion, disability, or gender identity. So let's go on to the next one. That's the majority of race, ethnicity, bias, ancestry bias motivated incidents involved intimidation. Nearly 60% of the religiously biased motivation incidents involved destruction or damage of property. That's depicted in this slide. Again, these are the offense types that are that were provided on the Crime Data Explorer. Again, the FBI's UCR defines intimidation as unlawfully place another person in reasonable fear of bodily harm through the use of threatening words and/or other contact, but without displaying a weapon or subjecting the victim to actual physical attack. And so that's an offense that's often listed in these reports that go into that are filed in the UCR reports. Some additional findings. Only if you could go on to the next slide, Susan. Only 28% of the hate and bias crimes reported to the FBI resulted in an arrest, which is, to me, a pretty low clearance rate. 66% did not result in an arrest, and the remaining 6% could not be identified or located by law enforcement. Of the total 107 cases accepted for prosecution by the DAs, 71% of them had at least one conviction. So fairly low numbers, but again, what we were trying to establish with this report is just some baseline information, because when I went around asking for this information, no one could tell me anything about clearance rates for these types of crimes in Maine. Now what I'm not sharing with you right now, but what's in the report is that in some prosecutorial districts in Maine, because they're more populated than other districts in Maine, we could do some district level analysis. So that's something that, if you are wanting to find out a little bit more about how these cases, what kind of outcomes there were for these kind of cases, not only at the state level, but in some districts, we can kind of do that at the district level. So let's go on to the next slide, Susan. So a couple other just high-level findings. Using the study methodology, the AG's office found that 6% of the hate and bias incidences submitted to the FBI resulted in a civil order. The There's an array of reasons as to why the AG's office could not locate or identify these records, including not having enough information to identify the incidents. So what was claimed by the AG in some of these cases is we didn't give them enough information. In a large number of these cases, the incident was never referred to the AG's office because there wasn't a perpetrator identified. There were a couple of cases where the ATN that I provided to the AG did not match up with any of the ATNs in their database. So a fair number, a small number of, a significant number of cases could not be identified by the AG's office for a variety of reasons. Another reason that the AG's office may have been unable to identify these cases is due to changes in data management system over the study period. The AG's office developed a new internal tracking system on hate and bias crimes in 2010. A number of the cases prior in the early years of our study period were not able to be found as easily as cases in the latter part of our study period. So anyways, those are some of the key findings. So in terms of recommendations, we feel like we have highlighted some recommendations in the report that we feel could help with the reporting on hate and bias crimes. While new law enforcement officials receive some hate and bias crime reporting training, it's not at a level that we feel is sufficient. We are also, in talking with law enforcement officials, we kind of got the sense that requiring officers to receive refresher training on this topic every 5 years would be beneficial. In all main law enforcement agencies have civil rights officers. These are individuals that have other duties within their respective departments. For the most part, those officers are unknown to the public. So if a crime happens here in Portland where I live, and I want to reach out to the civil rights officer with the Portland Police Department, that information is not readily available, and that person could help me as the victim of a crime. We wanted to kind of publicize and encourage law enforcement agencies to put that information out on their website so that people know that a department has a civil rights officer. A lot of people don't know that. Let's go on to the next slide, Susan. Here's a couple other recommendations. There is a category on the reporting forms for transgender that falls under the sexual orientation category. That is not a sexual orientation. That needs to be cleaned up. The tracking system here in Maine is not state of the art, I think, and I think we recommend that they invest some resources to track hate and bias crimes across the state, not just as they come into the AG's office. And we feel like the hate and bias crimes, after talking with certain law enforcement officials and policymakers, is that outcomes should be consistently reported to the public to let them know how these cases are proceeding through the justice system. So those are the recommendations that we came up with in the report. And again, this report was released in May of 2022. Our communication plan included a press release. We had numerous interviews by local news stations. The report caught the attention of Maine's U.S. attorney, who has taken up this issue and wants to, even though we focused on state hate and bias crimes, she's taken this issue up in terms of how her office reports, handles cases that are brought, that are tried at the federal level here in the district. So that's been exciting. And so anyways, at that point, and again, this is Hannah and my contact information. And again, a big shout out to Jack McDevitt for his involvement in this project as well. So thank you very much again to JRSA.
All right, thank you, George. So our last presenter of the session is our winner in the Research and Policy Large SAC category. And the winner in this category was Oregon, with their publication, Statistical Transparency of Police Reporting per House Bill 2355. In this publication, the researchers used 3 methods to examine the traffic and pedestrian stop data acquired by the STOP program for racial and ethnic disparities. They used the veil of darkness analysis, which examined the initial decision to stop an individual, and it takes advantage of natural variations in daylight and darkness throughout the year. The second method they employed was the predicted disposition analysis, which examined matching routes using statistical technique called propensity score analysis to explore whether disparities exist in stop outcomes, and if, after matching on all available data points in the stop data, whether minority individuals are either cited, searched, or arrested more often than similarly situated white individuals. Finally, they used the KPT hit rate analysis, which compares relative rates of successful searches across racial and ethnic groups, and it assumes that search decisions by officers are made based on race or ethnicity, neutral criteria. Now, the judges in this publication noted that the study's research design and analytical approach showed a lot of innovation, and they applauded them for their varied analytical approaches in this publication. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Kelly to present on the Oregon winning publication.
All right, thank you, Brad. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Okay, I think so. Yep. I would like to thank JRSA for the award and the recognition. We really appreciate it. And also want to thank the other presenters. It's amazing how similar the really hard tasks we're all taking on are. So Oregon is also doing some work that the last presenter shared as well. So it's just great to get a chance to see what other folks are working on, and then, you know, go check out your reports and figure out what works for you. Susan is sharing my slides for me, which gives me some calmness for that. Thank you, Susan. And so I also want to thank the folks that worked on this report with me. You know, this particular effort, I think of all the things that we do, really takes a team. You can see here we have a whole list of folks that worked on it. It is a big thing that we are doing. And so I want to thank the other authors, Michael Weinerman, Siobhan McAllister, Catherine Talon, Andrew Powell, and Carrie Glazer. And this is also really timely. We do this report, we've done it yearly. It's due December 1st. So we, just as we learned we had received this award, we were in crunch mode of getting the next one out. And so that was very timely for us and quite nice. Just a quick word on the Oregon Statistical Analysis Center. We're in a state agency called the CJC, co-located with the SAA, and we're also the state sentencing commission. So here is some background on the actual bill that created this effort. The bill that requires all the law enforcement agencies in the state to report the traffic stop data to us, the CJC, passed in 2017. And the data elements are actually listed in the bill, so you can see them all listed there. Our analysis is at the law enforcement agency level, so that, you know, the results that we do show conclusions for specifically at the agency level. You'll notice there is not any information on there about specific officers. The bill actually prohibits us from having any information about which officers made the stops. And then we also have perceived demographics of the individuals who are stopped, but we are not allowed to receive any other information or any identifying information of the stopped individuals as well. So we're limited to the information that we have there. It's a lot of data in order for us to do these three methods with. And again, it's at the law enforcement agency level that we can conduct this analysis for. Next slide, please. And so our requirements actually listed in the bill that we have to do an annual report and do the analysis that we do to identify patterns or practices of profiling. So our main concern is to do accurate analysis with the data that we have and minimizing false positives, but also having information that is understandable and actionable as well. Next slide, please. And so when this effort started, of course, it was a big lift. A lot of agencies were concerned or perhaps not quite understanding what we would do with the stop data. A lot of agencies were concerned that we would do benchmark work, which a lot of other places do that. And we explored that and ran into a lot of challenges with that and a lot of methodological weaknesses with that. So here's a couple of examples. Oregon is a big state. So here on the left are the tourist population estimates in different parts of the state, and then these are even higher with a seasonal component to it. And then on the right is kind of the commuting pattern challenges that come through as well. And I think this is even pre-COVID, so it's probably changed. But you know, the driving population looks different than the census residential population. Which looks different than other adult employed population. However you slice and dice that census data, it's really hard to get at a good estimate of the driving population. So we're actually not using census data at all in the analysis that we do. Some folks can take the data that we provide and then take the census data and put it together if they want to take on that benchmark approach, but we do not do that to identify disparities in the report. Next slide, please. So what do we do with the data? So of course we have some summary level data. Here's just an example of weekly stops over time. So this isn't used to identify disparities, but it provides context and some overall trends of the data. Some of the agencies are quite small and we actually cannot do a whole lot in terms of the rigorous analyses, but we can still provide the sample level data and some other summary measures here. So of course, no denying the impact of COVID there, the red dashed line. And then also interestingly, you can see that last kind of vertical line to show when additional agencies started reporting, we see stop volume has not returned to pre-COVID levels, and that's with additional agencies reporting into the system. And so it continues to be below pre-COVID levels, probably for different reasons in different places, but there's no denying it's had a pretty obvious impact in terms of stop volume, and I'm sure in other challenges that law enforcement have as well that we see come through in the data that we received. Next slide, please. So what do we do to identify disparities? We have 3 particular tests that we do, call it a multimodal approach, and each test is testing for different components of the stop, and so that allows us to look at things from different angles, using multivariate stats where we can, kind of getting that holistic view. And so in Brad's introduction, he described one of the tests as the veil of darkness, which is what we called it in last year's report. This year we are going to refer to that as the decision to stop analysis. We got some really good feedback on the name of that test, and it was made some folks uncomfortable, understandably so. Some folks said it kind of made them think of sundown laws, and so it is called veil of darkness in the literature, but in our next report, we will call it decision to stop. We changed the other test names as well. KPT hit rate is perhaps not quite clear what that is, so we'll be calling that one the search findings analysis, and then we, of course, like predicted disposition, but a lot of folks don't know what that means. And so we've changed that one to stop outcomes analysis. So just a update on labels and language for this next year's report as things kind of continue to evolve with our efforts around the stop report. Next slide, please. I'm not going to spend too much time here, which feels very strange. This is usually what everybody wants, but we have our three main analysis approaches here. Again, kind of looking at different components. Decision to stop is that clever comparison of stops made in daylight compared to darkness. Search findings is looking at just stops where a search was conducted, and then the hit rate or successful search rate across racial groups. And then finally, stop outcomes, so testing for differences in citation, searches, and arrests across racial groups, doing the propensity score analysis there. If you do want to talk in detail about these, reach out to us because we love to talk about this stuff, but we're gonna breeze right through it today. I will say that, oh, sorry, Susan, go back. It's my bad. Just real quick, kind of thinking about a point on a upcoming slide here. The thing that we tend to find the most often when we do this analysis for agencies in Oregon, the most common finding that we have across all the different agencies, and this is for large, medium, and small agencies, is a difference in citation rates for Hispanic or Latinx drivers. And that we've seen that for a couple years now. And so we've done some work to see if we can understand what's driving that. A lot of what drives that are citations for things like driving while suspended, driving without a license, driving without insurance. And so it's kind of led to some other policy type questions, and also thinking about officer decisions. And officers will say, hey, once I pulled the driver over and they don't have a license, I'm writing them a ticket. Like, I really have no choice but to write that ticket at that point. If they're speeding 10 over, I have some more discretion in that decision. So kind of thinking about how to account for some of that in the work that we're doing has been one theme that's come up. Okay, next slide, please. Thanks, Susan. So intended audience, the actual bill lists that the report goes to the governor's office, the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, or DPSST, which is a state agency that trains the law enforcement officers in the state, and then also legislative committees related to the judiciary. And then we have our partner organizations as well. So of course, the law enforcement agencies that provide the data to us and then want to use the results that come from that. The Attorney General sponsored the bill. We will go present to city councils or county commissions. Kind of a subset of the county commission is the Local Public Safety Coordinating Council, or LPSC. The LPSCs have a role in this. A lot of media questions that come from this, and advocacy organizations as well that are very interested in the transparency of sharing the stop data. Next slide, please. And so, of course, all those partners want to understand the results of this analysis. You know, we're doing 3 fairly rigorous statistical tests, and to try to give a 20-minute presentation to a council to make sure they understand the results of that can be challenging, but we've been working on it for a couple years, and also thinking about what it means for a specific agency and what they can do with that information is what we're trying to convey. So we've done presentations to different groups, trying to avoid some of the non-technical language, you know, and we start with multivariate regression or propensity score analysis. Nobody knows what we're talking about. So trying to be accurate, but also stay away from too much of the technical language. We have data dashboards up as well to share the agency level results, so folks can kind of dig into the agency data, and also provides that transparency, and then hopefully viewing the program as a resource for law enforcement agencies and other partners as well. Next slide. And so I will end here with kind of thinking about, you know, hey, we do all this work. This report is so much work. What happens, right? Why are we doing it? What happens? What's the outcome here? So for agencies that are identified and recommended to work with DPSST, DPSST has actually a complete increased capacity to provide technical assistance, so there can be that follow-up component, and hopefully not in a way that's punitive, right? In a way of, hey, we see this pattern for your agency. DPSST can help you to dive into that and figure it out. And if needed, our agency can do some additional analysis as well. The most common additional analysis that's been requested has been the impact of those particular violations that I mentioned: driving while suspended, driving without a license, driving without insurance. I think there's a few other smaller ones that come in on the impact of citation rate differences. And so we actually have been able to add some additional variables to the data repository. Because of the way the bill is written, they are optional to provide, but actually a lot of agencies have started to do it now because they see the benefit of accounting for that additional information in the analysis. And I think in the beginning, a lot of folks were scared and nervous and thinking like, you know, we'd say, hey, the problem is this agency for these kind of stops on a Thursday night. And it is not quite that specific or not quite that simple. You know, a lot of the follow-up work and a lot of the impact has kind of been at a higher level policy and resource allocation decision. You know, thinking about officers writing the ticket for driving while suspended, they don't have a lot of discretion in that decision. And so really, if you're going to impact that, you need to take a step back about what causes folks to not have a license in the first place, and think about how to impact that. Some law enforcement agencies are doing education and outreach campaigns to certain communities. They've partnered with advocacy organizations in their communities to try to share that information with folks and encourage folks to kind of go through that bureaucratic process of getting a driver's license or having a driver's license reinstated. And in 2020, the legislature did pass this House bill referenced here. So this removes the penalty of a driver's license suspension for failure to pay fees if that's the only component. It does remove that part. So that was informed in part by the work of this particular program. And then I'll just end with, it has been crucial for this to be updated yearly. It would be easier if this was a rinse and repeat exercise, but it is not. It is different every year. We see different patterns, different trends, different things coming up with the data. This next one will be the fourth report. The first one was in 2019, that we have had new laws passed. We've had different case law decisions come down that have changed a lot of how officers do their work. And it is quite different than it was even a couple years ago. So as those things change, we want to update this analysis to keep track of what is changing. You know, some of those changes were specifically to hopefully have fewer stops for lower level offenses for people of color. But sometimes a law has changed and there's kind of an unintended consequence that comes through. And so we will see that in this analysis here that we are doing. So I will end there. I've got one last slide with some resources on it for folks that want to dig into some more of the details, and our next report will be out in a couple days. And I will stop there and say thanks again to JRSA and the other presenters today. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Kelly. So we have about 4 or 5 minutes here at the end to go through some of the questions that have come in. And the first question that came in is for Wisconsin. So if Ashley and Mary can go ahead and put themselves on camera. The question that came in for you all was, what's the back end that you all are using for your dashboards? Are you using SQL or Excel sheets or something along those lines?
Yeah, so for the UFED Data Explorer, we are utilizing SQL that is linked directly into Power BI. So those are refreshed every week at 2 a.m. on a Friday, keeping the dashboards really up to date. And that integration has worked pretty seamlessly for us.
Thank you. The next question is for George. We're curious how you define stalking in your victimization report. Did you all use the same definition that was used in the NCVS?
All right, let me go back to that. Let me go back to that section. I should know that right off the top of my head, but I want to get it right. The survey asked, I'm reading from our report, the survey asked respondents if they felt threatened by another person other than bill collectors, telephone solicitors, as a result of any of the following behaviors. And that included following or spying, unsolicited email, texts, unsolicited phone calls, waiting, standing outside a place where the person lived or worked, showing up places, leaving unwanted gifts or items, spreading rumors, and other unwanted communication. So we feel that there may have been some overinterpretation on that other unwanted communication, so that the rates were a little bit higher than what some people might view as classic stalking behavior. So that's how we defined it.
All right, George, and one more question for you.
Okay.
In regards to the hate and the bias crime study, is Maine a full NIBRS reporting state?
That's a great question.
And was it for the for that at the time of the study, for that time period, the 2008 to 2017, was it also a full NIBRS reporting state?
So no, the answer to that question is no. Or the answer to both questions is no. So we are not fully NIBRS compliant right now, though I think the numbers are inching upwards. I mean, I know that all states have to be compliant. I think that that has taken a little bit of arm twisting to bring that about, but it certainly wasn't during the study period.
And I should say that that last question provides me an opportunity to plug one of the resources that we have available on JRSA at the Incident-Based Reporting Resource Center, the IBRRC, which you can link to from our homepage. Within that page, we have a map that shows the NIBRS coverage of each of the states. That we've pulled the information from the CDE from the 2021 NIBRS Crime in the USA report that came out. So if you're interested to know more about what the NIBRS coverage looks like in Maine or in any other state, I would encourage you to go visit that site. So for Chris in Wisconsin, thanks for plugging that indirectly. So I think that's all we have for time for questions right now. I would like to say that all of the links to the winning publications, with the exception of the one publication George mentioned on the crime in Maine, are available in the community forums link that Jeff showed a little bit earlier this afternoon. I encourage everyone to come back tomorrow, and also if you have any questions that you would like to direct towards the presenters today, I would also encourage you to drop that into the discussion forum for this session. Presenters may want to subscribe to that discussion forum just so they know if there are questions that are posed to them. But I would also like to encourage everyone to come back tomorrow. Tomorrow we have another full schedule of presentations in the afternoon. We're going to start with a presentation from the BJS director, Alex Piquero. But then we're also going to have two panels on data standardization within criminal history reporting and for NIBRS. And then we're going to close out the day hearing from Arizona on their plans to create a data infrastructure for their criminal justice and criminal history data. So with that said, I would like to thank everyone for their participation, for their attendance, and we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.